I want to talk to you about Mr. Trump's economic policy. So much noise, so much confusion to try to basically explain what it's about, why it's the way it is, and what's happening to it. I call this imposing tariffs, firing Fed workers, because those are the two key parts of his program you should keep in mind. So let's begin. What's the problem Mr. Trump is trying to solve? And I don't, by speaking this way, mean to suggest that he's clearly focused on economics. He's not. That he clearly understands what the situation is. Looks like he doesn't. That he has a strategy, not much of one, but then again, not zero. He does have real economic problems. His advisors for sure tell him about it, and he has to do something. So here's the problem that they are focusing him on. It's called the federal budget. It's the relationship of how much money the federal government takes in taxes versus how much it spends on everything from fighting wars to helping Social Security to helping colleges and universities, although Mr. Trump, is trying to cut that back. And the difference between what the government spends and what it takes in taxes, it has to borrow. If it spends more than it takes in taxes, it has to borrow. Just like you and I, if we spend more than we take in our wages and salaries and other incomes, we have to borrow. And the government borrows also. In recent years, it's been borrowing tons. Why is that? Well, the major reason is there are two huge expenses that have gotten worse over the last decade. The first problem of our government's budget is the tax cut that Mr. Trump, during his first presidency, gave to corporations and the rich. One of the biggest tax cuts in history given to corporations and the rich, even though they had just come off 30 years of redistributing income from the bottom and the middle to the top. Never did those people need a tax cut less. Mr. Trump gave it to them anyway because he wanted and got their support in exchange. So that's one reason why the government is short of taxes and has to borrow. Here's the second reason. We have the biggest military establishment in the world. We spend more on the defense we call it, than the next 8 or 9 countries combined, and those countries include Russia and China. So it's an enormous expense, outweighing anything any other country does. And then on top of it, in the last 10 years, we have spent extra on 2 huge wars. One in the Ukraine area against Russia, and the other one supporting Israel in its fight with the Palestinians. Big expenditures at the same time that you have tax cuts. No mystery why in recent years the government has borrowed trillions of dollars. What's the problem? You can't keep doing that. You know why? Because the ratio of the debt of the United States relative to our economy and what it can produce has become unsustainable. We produce somewhere around $28 trillion of goods and services a year, but we are now in debt 35 trillion. Our debts are outrunning our economy more and more each year. And why is that a problem? Because our creditors are getting nervous. They're getting nervous that the debt we have is so costly, because remember, the government has to pay interest to whoever lends money to the United States. The more the United States borrows, the more interest it has to pay. And that's becoming huge. This coming year, it is expected that the interest will be more than the government spends on the Defense Department. It's too much. And the rest of the world says, uh-oh, the people of America may rise up and say, we don't want you to spend on the war, and we don't want you to give interest to the rich who lend money to the government because you're cutting back the basic needs we have for food, clothing, shelter, schooling, medical care, and all the rest. At which point, the creditors risk their loan to the United States becoming unpayable, interest being cut back. They're not going to wait for that. And what they have shown us in recent weeks is they're not going to do it anymore. That's why the dollar lost 10% of its value over the last 3 months. That's why a couple of Mondays ago, the Japanese, the #1 creditor country of the United States, decided to reduce its outstanding holding of the U.S. debt, the U.S. IOUs, which is how the U.S. borrows. That message from our ally, Japan, really hit home. So Mr. Trump knows by now, with little raps on the nose, that the global markets of capital and money have told him, you've got to do something. And so that's what he's doing. He's trying to cut back on government spending, and he's trying to raise taxes because that's the way he can reduce the amount the government has to borrow. How is he lowering government spending? Well, that's where Elon Musk comes in. His job is to fire huge numbers of people who work for the federal government, Fed workers, to cut back on their budgets. Firing them becomes the way to cancel the programs that they had been hired to administer. So it's a way of cutting government spending on foreign aid, on our veterans, on everything the government does, with a hatchet, or with Mr. Musk, a chainsaw. And the other thing he's doing is raising taxes. Which taxes? Tariffs. Tariffs are a tax. He's raising the tariffs because he wants taxes to go up, because we are all going to have to pay higher prices for what comes into this country, because in addition to paying for the object that comes in, we now have to pay Uncle Sam the tariff, the tax on top of it. So we're being asked to pay more taxes while the government does much less for us. And that's Mr. Trump's solution to the problem. And you should understand that this is remarkable. Republicans used to be against solving problems by raising taxes. Now they're in the forefront of doing it big time. And we are all going to pay. We're going to lose the services we counted on from the government, many of them, and we're going to be paying more for almost everything we buy because tariffs raise the prices of nearly everything. This is a terrible economic policy, but you now understand the logic. And don't miss the crucial point, because if you get this, you'll understand not just the moment we're in, but the whole capitalist system. This program is a program designed for corporations and the rich. They don't care if the prices go up, because that's what it means to be a corporation or to be rich. If you're rich, paying an extra 10% for everything that you buy, or 20%, what's the difference? You're rich. You could care less. And if you're a corporation, all you do is raise your prices to offset anything you have to pay more for that goes into your business. Because you're an employer, you're in a position to raise prices. For those of us who aren't employers, that's 97% of the American people, we can't do that. We're not in a position to set prices. So corporations and the rich are the winners. They're exempted from the suffering. They're going to solve the economic problems created by corporations and the rich, caused by their investment policies. They're moving production overseas. They're gouging profits by jacking up prices already. All of that, which has produced our economic difficulties, is quietly hidden. And Mr. Trump, like the people who run the Republican and the Democratic parties, has come up with a really odd way of solving a problem. But it isn't so odd once you understand that he solved the problem the way our leaders always do, fixing the mess made by corporations and the rich on our backs, on the backs of the people, of all the tens and hundreds of thousands losing their federal jobs, starting to look in the private sector where the rest of us work and pushing down wages and working conditions as they are desperate to find work, taxing us in the form of the higher prices we're going to have to pay. That's how they're going to solve the problem. That's the way they do. That's how capitalism works. The root problem here, it isn't the imports, it isn't the tariffs, it isn't even firing these workers. The problem here is capitalism. If you didn't have that kind of problem, if you didn't have a society in which a tiny minority own and operate the productive businesses of the country, you wouldn't put them in a position to make this kind of abomination into the policy of a government.